Welcome back to another episode of Rock Boys Football. Late Wednesday night, some massive news coming out of the transfer portal as Georgia defensive lineman Christen Miller, intending to enter the transfer portal, and Dale, in my mind, becomes maybe the most coveted interior defensive lineman currently available in the transfer portal. The Georgia fans know. And the boys have been talking about Christen Miller for the last couple of months as kind of that breakout guy heading into 2024. Very good football player, immediately going to be extremely coveted. And I think the interesting conversation we have here is it can't transfer within the SEC conference. Still, and I take a look at teams that need interior defensive line help: USC, Oregon, Miami. He took official visits coming out of high school to all three of those schools. So let's get into the conversation of who's going to land Christen Miller, what teams will be going for him. I also want to have the conversation about how good Christen Miller actually is heading into 2024. Fired up to get into this one. Before we do, and as always, just want to say thank you to you guys. It has been a blast talking the transfer portal the last week and a half, and the amount of support y'all have shown the fellas truly does mean a lot. One, if y'all do enjoy the content, consider subscribing to the channel. More importantly, let it fly in the comments section where you think Christen Miller winds up playing his football in 2024. Dill, this is your guy. It's been your guy for the last couple months. I'll let you cook a little bit on Christen Miller here.
I mean, a guy who I think was a little bit underutilized at Georgia because they were playing some guys ahead of him who were a little older, but they weren't the playmakers that Christen Miller is. And they're more space eaters, Nazir Stackhouse, some of those guys that are Warren Brinson, space eaters at Georgia. And then you saw Christen Miller get in there, make some plays. You saw against Alabama, getting in the backfield, making TFLs, rushing the passer at a little higher level. I think he does give you a little bit more of that playmaker from the middle ability than maybe some guys. Even you compare him to like a Dominic Williams. Dominic Williams is a handful. Dominic Williams is a really, really good player, but a little different than what Christen Miller is. Christen Miller, much more that guy who's going to stuff the stat sheet a little bit, make those high impact plays. And he's going to be a huge, I'm kind of with you. I saw you do your rankings show earlier today about defensive tackles. Put him up at the top because
I'm gonna have to revisit that one because I do like, and this is not a shot at Derek Harmon. Love him, love Dominic Williams. Christen Miller's in that league, and we didn't get to see as much of him just because of how loaded that Georgia defensive line is. I think Christen Miller's that guy. And Dill, kind of going off of what you just talked about, one, I thought played his best football towards the end of the season. He's also going into year 3. That's normally when you see interior defensive lineman guys along the line of scrimmage start to play their best football. And on top of that, I think he can do a little bit of everything, right? If you're looking for a nose, he played over 50 snaps at that nose tackle alignment for this Georgia program, 120 snaps as a 3-tech. I think he can be that anchor nose if you want him to. He can also be that penetrator, that difference maker if you want him to as well. Now, Dill, we talked about Christen Miller. He's clearly our guy heading into 2024. Where do you think he's going? Where do you think he's playing his college football in 2024 here?
You're bearing the lead a little bit if you're not looking at his Twitter and seeing him retweet the USC account that kind of gave him the check out USC.
I've already seen though. We were very active with the USC fans. They have been all over Christen Miller going back to yesterday night.
I mean that when that happened, your antenna, the bat signal goes up a little bit. You're like, oh, is there another guy hitting for the defensive tackle? USC has not done what I think they need to do yet. Haven't got their guy at that spot, a spot that if you watch that spring game, they're underdeveloped. There's some good young talent, but you need some guys to come in and complement Bear Alexander and play really high level football. I mean, this is the type of guy USC desperately needs. No doubt they're going to make a very strong push at him. And I mean, he's obviously taken
we just had this conversation talking USC the other day in terms of, and you could make this same argument for the other teams we're going to talk about, Oregon, Miami. Dill, I feel like these programs.
Well, I do think there's probably a different level of desperation for USC because, I mean, Oregon, Miami, you'd like to have another defensive tackle, but I don't think you go into the season deathly afraid that
100%.
Those groups are much more developed than
the
USC.
Interesting point with Christen Miller, and we talked about this with USC the other day, is I wonder if Lincoln Riley is just being a little patient and saying, hey, what SEC bodies are going to hit the transfer portal, right? You've seen guys from Michigan State. You've seen guys from the Big Ten. They haven't been SEC transfers yet. And I think the big thing is you look at the other programs that are kind of in desperation mode for interior defensive linemen. It's largely been LSU and Texas. And now they don't have a shot at Christian Miller. So I think Lincoln Riley's sitting here and saying, instead of getting in a bidding war for Dominic Williams with Oklahoma, with Texas, with LSU, I'm going to sit back here, wait for a couple SEC bodies to hit the portal. Those are the guys I'm going to go after because I don't have to compete with LSU and Texas for these kind of bodies. I think this is maybe why Lincoln Riley was being patient when the USC fans were getting kind of ticked off a little bit. He might have played the game just about as good as you could play it in the spring portal window.
I mean, we'll see. Now they're like the defensive tackle room. I think we kind of looked like, oh, are guys gonna move? Are there gonna be enough to go around? Kind of look. I mean, there's enough now. Michigan State losing a couple of really good players. Georgia now, like with Christen Miller. So there's guys in the portal. The teams that need them, I think, are going to be able to get them. And that very much a relief, especially for USC, because again, I think that level of need. That's as high as anyone.
So the next two teams you got to talk about are the teams that have also been very active in the portal, have been shown the propensity to say, we're pushing our chips in. Two teams that we've kind of identified as all-in contenders, right? The Oregon Ducks and the Miami Hurricanes. Like, these are two teams that know they're going to be good in 2024, might want to make a move for Christian Miller. You start with the Oregon Ducks. They also got an official visit from Christian Miller coming out of high school. You kind of know Dan Lanning, if he has an opportunity to get the line of scrimmage play better, he's going to be taking it.
Dan Lanning must know him a little bit. I'm sure he was part of the recruiting efforts too.
That's a very good point.
So no doubt there's a connection.
Yeah, and we talked about Oregon. And I think there's two conversations to have with Oregon on the inside of the defensive line, and it largely was they'll probably wait till spring practice. They grabbed Jamari Caldwell from Houston before spring practice. They got a lot of young guys coming in that they feel good about. I think the conversation we had was, let's see what we have from some of these guys like Jericho Johnson, like Aiden Breland. If they seem like reliable guys that we can play as true freshmen, maybe we don't need to make a push for Christian Miller. And I think we'll get a chance to kind of tell how Dan Lanning feels about those young guys on the inside, whether they make a full court press at a guy like Christian Miller. Last team we got to talk about, the Miami Hurricanes. Time and time again, when we're talking Miami in the transfer portal, it is if they have the opportunity to get better going into 2024, they're going to take it. They just had Jared Harrison Hunt transfer out. We've talked about some big bodies coming on the inside. Y'all got one here in Christian Miller.
And we've talked about, like, Miami has a decent stable, but they don't have the guy, I don't think. They don't have their guy to replace the Leonard Taylor type production, who was very productive from that inside. I mean, Christen Miller fits that bill. Harmon, they fit that bill. So, again, Miami is not a team that, like, their depth is okay. They just don't have that hammer unless, like, a Justin Scott emerges as that guy. But, again, you're believing in a true freshman who isn't even on campus yet. So, I do think Miami, with this type of guy, it makes a ton of sense for them to go after. I don't think they go after, like, this, like a certain guys, because I don't think it makes them better. But when there's a big-time dominant guy in that portal, I think they're a very good candidate.
You just used the term, the guy. We're looking for a guy, a difference maker. Christian Miller, I think Christian Miller's that guy heading into 2024. Dill, I'll ask you to kind of close this out. You listen to what I talked about on the interior defensive line. Of the available defensive linemen in the portal, where do you stack, I should say, Christian Miller?
No, you know that this is my guy. I think him and Dominic Williams really tight. Again, as a Michigan guy, if you watch Dominic Williams give Michigan the problem he gave them as a true freshman in that CFP game, I mean, he's really, really good. Again, I do think I'd put Christian Miller a little bit higher just because he adds you that playmaking ability, that ability to rush the passer, get his TFLs, and make those plays that change football.
But I also think he can play that Dominic Williams role pretty well. He might not be as good at that nose tackle that Dominic Williams is, but I think he can do that. But
he's not a guy who's going to get pushed around.
But also can provide that juice in terms of getting penetration, getting in the backfield. This is – I don't know if everyone else is going to think this is massive news. Rock Boys football we think this is some big time news coming out Wednesday night. Would love to hear from you guys in the comment section. Let us have it in the comment section. We'll talk to y'all later.